Prince Chun found himself having to raise the money to rebuild Qingyuan, the Garden of Clear Ripples. What was the link between the garden and the country's fledgling more powerful navy? The garden would eventually be given a new name, the Summer Palace. But why had it been necessary to keep the rebuilding work a secret? Stay with us for the 5th episode in our series, Untold Stories from the Summer Palace.
In October 1885, the Qing government founded its Admiralty Board. The man appointed to the new position of Controller of the Admiralty and therefore head of the Navy was Prince Chun. Although the day-to-day running of the department would be undertaken by Minister Li Hongjiang, the appointment marked the end of Prince Chun's decade-long voluntary retirement. In 1886, Emperor Guangxu turned 16, the age at which he could rule in his own right. Empress Dowager Cixi saw the occasion as an opportunity to promote the reconstruction of the imperial gardens, which had been destroyed by British and French forces in 1860. The rebuilding project had first been proposed 13 years earlier during Emperor Tongzhi's reign, but had been shelved. Now, as the power behind the throne, the Empress Dowager was determined to get her way. All the same, she needed an excuse of some kind to justify the huge expense. As the father of the young emperor, Prince Chun had been very cautious in his dealings with Empress Dowager Cixi. The prince was convinced that the best way to protect his son was to ensure that the Empress Dowager got everything she wanted. And so Prince Chun, having originally been adamantly opposed to the plan for reconstructing the gardens, was now openly in favour of it. Of the 5 imperial gardens in western Beijing, Yuan Mingyuan was the largest, but it was also the most badly damaged. When the matter of rebuilding the imperial gardens had been raised previously, Yuan Mingyuan had been the focus of the most vehement opposition. Clearly, rebuilding it was still out of the question. Changchun Garden, the Garden of Eternal Spring, Jingming Garden, the Garden of Tranquility and Brightness, and Jingyi Garden, the Garden of Tranquility and Pleasure, were simply too small to please Cixi. Qingyi Yuan, the Garden of Clear Ripples, was larger. It had natural hills and water, and as the foundations of its ruined buildings were still in place, rebuilding it would be easier. Qingyi Yuan had been built by Emperor Qianlong a century before for his mother's birthday. There could be little objection to Emperor Guangxu rebuilding it for his own mother. Another factor was that the government was intent on strengthening the country's navy, and during Emperor Qianlong's reign, Lake Kunming at Qingyi Yuan had been used by the Imperial Navy for drills. And so, in September 1886, Prince Chuan submitted a request to the imperial court for the Beiyang fleet to be permitted to conduct a drill on Lake Kunming. He added that since the Empress Dowager would be invited to inspect the maneuvers, the ruined buildings by the lake should be repaired. His request was naturally enough agreed to by the Empress Dowager, but there was a problem. There was no money for the rebuilding project. The solution was to have the Navy allocate funds for the rebuilding work. Imperial architect Lei Tingchang was put in charge of the rebuilding work. When he inspected Qingyi Yuan, he found that nothing was left unscathed. The 17-arch bridge had survived the fire, but had lost all its marble rails. Longevity Hill had been stripped of its cypress and pine trees. The stone steps leading to the Pavilion of Buddhist Fragrance were in a dreadful state. Baoyuan Tower was overgrown with weeds, and its eaves were damaged beyond repair. And weeds were even growing inside the marble boat. Lei Tingchang didn't even have the original blueprints for the garden to work with, as they had been kept at Yuan Mingyuan and had been destroyed in the fire there. Everything would have to be surveyed and measured from scratch before he could even start planning the rebuilding work. As for Prince Chuan, his main concern was how to come up with the money. Finding the huge sums would be difficult enough, but to complicate matters, he could not state what they would actually be used for. He revealed this dilemma in a letter to leading court official Li Hongjiang. Lei Tingchang was unconcerned about the financial difficulties. He was preoccupied with a crucial step in the reconstruction effort, creating individual models of all the buildings that were to be restored. These models, called tangyang, were made to scale from strong paper and wooden sticks. Each tangyang had to be approved by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor before the work could proceed. Among the tangyangs was one for a new theatre. Qingyi Yuan had not had a theatre originally, but the reconstruction project included plans for one. Called Dehe, it was specially designed for Empress Dowager Cixi, who was a huge fan of opera. The theatre was originally designed to stand beside Lake Kunming, with part of the building extending out onto the water. However, the location was changed to the east side of Longevity Hill on the orders of Emperor Guangxu. Once the models had been made, the blueprints could be drawn up. In all, Lei Tingchang drew 308 blueprints, using nothing more than a pencil, compass, ruler, writing brush, and charcoal marker. All the buildings were marked out, and according to this plan, everything was to be rebuilt. And yet, one key installation was not included in the blueprints. the Lake Kunming Naval Academy, the only thing in the garden that was directly associated with the Navy. The Naval Academy, sited on the ruined farming and weaving area, was completed by the end of 1886. The opening ceremony was attended by a group of naval officers who, as soon as it was over, lost no time in rushing to Longevity Hill for another ceremony, this one for installing the beams at Pai Yuen Dian, the Hall of Dispelling Clouds. According to the reconstruction plan, the Hall of Dispelling Clouds was to be built on the site previously occupied by Yanshou Temple. The building would be for Empress Dowager Cixi's personal use. Construction of the hall began at the end of 1886, closely supervised by the Empress Dowager in person. Camels came bearing stone from the nearby mountains and left laden with clinker and other refuse. Lei Tingchang designed Pai Yuen Dian to have 3 courtyards arranged in a row, as was seen in the front part of the Forbidden City. It took 9 years to complete the hall, from clearing the ground to the final touches. The work continued throughout the entire Qingyi Yuan rebuilding project. As the largest palace in the garden, Pai Yuen Dian cost enormous amounts of time and money. It's been calculated that the internal decoration alone took 275,000 man-days to complete. The palace's vast 800 square metre interior needed to be partitioned, and the partitioning, while maintaining the open aspect, had to be pleasing to the eye. This was achieved by the innovative use of 29 screens. One screen, called the Sha Chu or Green Gauze Cabinet, has a central part that can open or close like doors. The carved characters read 10,000, and the symbols stand for longevity and happiness. The hall also contained several half screens. They came in many styles, and some of them were highly decorative. There was a particular type of screen that divided the space into 3 parts using 2 railings. The blue gauze came from Jiangsu or Zhejiang and was the very finest available. It features exquisitely fashioned images of bats. The wood carving on the railing is highly complex open work. This octagonal screen has a carved design of many traditional 10,000 symbols. The design, popularly known as 9,999, is symbolic of never-ending good fortune. At Pai Yuen Dian, where Empress Dowager Cixi's birthday celebrations were held, the design represented the wish for her to enjoy a long life. The elaborate screens are both decorative and practical. One that stood beside the bed not only created a sense of privacy, but could also be used for hanging a bed curtain. It is said that just before the start of her birthday celebrations, Empress Dowager Cixi rested here. Another screen with multiple pigeonholes was used for displaying antiques. This is the only item of furniture in the hall that is made from red sandalwood. Even for the imperial family, red sandalwood was an expensive luxury. Lei Tingchang was worried about costs, so he purchased Hainan rosewood and Manchurian catalpa as a substitute. The rosewood was pale in colour and the catalpa dark. Both had to be coloured to produce a pleasing effect. The story goes that Empress Dowager Cixi was so anxious to move into the new hall that she did so even before the garden was completed. However, she woke up feeling ill after her first night there. The reason, she decided, was that the palace had been built on the site of the old Yanshou temple, and this must have offended the gods. So, she moved into Le Shou Hall, the Hall of Happiness and Longevity. There's no knowing whether the story is true or not. What we do know is that the Empress Dowager held her birthday celebrations in Paiyuandian, the Hall of Dispelling Clouds, instead of her living quarters. The two small circles on this map stand for two white bark pine trees. In traditional culture, a pine tree is a symbol of longevity. The decorative items in the yard were all catalogued and numbered. Some of the bronze vessels came from the Forbidden City, while others were gifts presented to the Dowager Empress on her birthday. This Sanshi Zuan, which dated from the late Shang dynasty and was thus 2,000 years old, was kept on a stand outside Paiyuandian. Another attempt at saving money involved objects dating from Emperor Qianlong's time being used to decorate the area outside the palace. The two lions came from the ruins of Changchuan Garden, the Garden of Eternal Spring. The 12 Taihu rockeries depicting the 12 animals in the 12-year cycle also came from the ruins of Changchuan Garden. Every success of the reconstruction project was a result of Lei Tingchang's hard work. The layout of the palace, the interior decor and the external decorations of the buildings formed a perfect whole. In this way, it complied with a major principle of traditional Chinese landscaping. No public announcement about the garden being rebuilt had been made, but with time it became common knowledge. In March 1888, Empress Dowager Cixi, in an attempt to quell public criticism, issued an edict in the name of Emperor Guangxu. It stated, "Emperor Qianlong built Qingyi Yuan for his mother. Emperor Guangxu is doing the same for the Empress Dowager. The garden will have a new name, Yi He Yuan, the Summer Palace." This project has been in progress for a year in secret. Now, for the first time, it is being made known to the public. For Prince Chuan, the fact that the project was no longer a secret made fundraising much easier. However, by this time, the building of the Navy's new Beiyang fleet was entering a critical phase. By the end of 1888, 6 months after the work at Qingyuan, now called the Summer Palace, was made publicly known, the Beiyang fleet was ready. For the first time, China possessed a powerful navy, ranking 8th in the world in terms of power and number 1 in Asia. Before long, a naval exercise was held in the Bohai Bay. The warships were modern and each had an impressive name: Jianyuan, or gallant, Chaoyong, awesome, and Yangwei, conqueror. The Summer Palace had in its northwestern corner its very own ship, the marble boat. The marble boat was moored with its prow to the shore and its stern to the water, in accordance with the maritime practice of southern China. The boat's original tower had been a traditional style wooden structure, but it had been destroyed during the fire of 1860. The boat was on the list of items to be rebuilt, although under a new name, Qingyan. Even its appearance was changed to suit the Empress Dowager's taste. The material used for the tower looked like rock, but it was actually wood, given a marble defect. On either side of the hull was a paddle wheel like those in a Western-styled steamship. The boat was Empress Dowager Cixi's preferred place for enjoying the cool of summer and the view during celebrations. The marble boat, with its close resemblance to a warship, was viewed by some people as a symbol of an unsinkable empire. However, it turned out to be a portent of the tragic demise of the Beiyang fleet. Within a short time of the marble boat being completed, the Beiyang fleet found itself short of money. The Summer Palace project had simply become too much of a drain on the Navy's coffers. Thus, the plans for the Summer Palace's reconstruction were amended so that buildings in less important places, or that were more decorative than functional, were simplified. Some were even removed from the plans altogether. This is the sole surviving image of Tianhua Pavilion. But with the aid of the photograph, it's possible to create a computerized image of the building as it would have looked at the time of Emperor Qianlong. The building had double eaves on 6 sides and a sloping roof, so that it resembled a Tianhua flower or broadleaf epiphyllum. Standing on the east side of the hill, it contrasted pleasantly with the sea of green vegetation, and the building also provided a fine view across the expanse of the lake. Lei Tingchang drew up 3 plans for the reconstruction of Tianhua Pavilion. In the first, it would have a single floor and single eaves. In the second, the sloping roof with the pointed top would be missing, although this would soon be restored. Finally, due to the budget constraints, he made the design even simpler. Because it no longer resembled a broadleaf epiphyllum, he changed the name to Jingfu Pavilion. This final version of the pavilion no longer afforded a sweeping view of the lake. It became instead a place for viewing the rain. The east side of the hill lost a significant building, yet the pavilion was fortunate because other buildings were never reconstructed.
Just as the rebuilding of the Summer Palace was nearing completion, war broke out. China's Beiyang fleet was destroyed by the Japanese. What impact would this military setback have on the rebuilding work at the Summer Palace? And how would it affect Empress Dowager Cixi's plans for celebrating her 60th birthday there? For the answers, please watch the 6th episode in the series Untold Stories from the Summer Palace.